All right, we are recording. 3, 2, 1. Welcome to Night Shift. Jeff Sharon here with you. We got the student of the game, Kyle Nash. We've got Donnie Basketball joining us here. Don Strouble in the house.
Donnie Ducks.
He's going to be doing our basketball coverage this year, quite a bit of it. You've already seen some of his fantastic work as well. Eric Lopez is going to join us in a little bit while he irons out some technical issues. No problems. Lots to talk about. We will hit up football. We will hit up men's basketball. In fact, we're going to lead with basketball here in a little bit. And we'll talk a little bit about soccer and volleyball as the show progresses. But first, let's dive in. Of course, don't forget you can follow us at blackandgoldbanneret.com. We are your home for UCF sports on SB Nation. We are on X at UCF Banneret _SBN. We are also on Instagram, Threads, Facebook, at Black and Gold Banneret, and of course, check out our YouTube channel, Black and Gold Banneret, as well. So, and there we are. Kyle Nash and Eric Lopez is in here with us as well. All right, but let's dive in real quick on basketball. And joining us, of course, like we mentioned, Don Strouble is here. Don Documents 407 on social media. Donnie, what's going on? You and I were both at the basketball game as UCF started their 2-game exhibition slate at home against Florida Gulf Coast. The good news and the bad news, I guess. We'll start with the good news. UCF won the exhibition thanks to a pretty good second half. But the bad news was Jaylin Sellers, who in your story that you can read on blackandgoldbanneret.com, went down in the second half with a non-contact injury. It did not look from either of our perspectives like it was a knee, which is usually what we associate with the term non-contact injury. He was down on the floor for a significant amount of time on his stomach. And then was stretchered out of the arena. So what did you see from where you were, and what have you heard since about Jaylin?
Well, first, I'll preface this with thanking you guys for having me on the show. I'm excited to do my first Monday show with y'all. And I was really happy to hear Kyle's bell. That's why I was verbally expressive there a minute ago, because I've always heard him just go bing. But seeing the bell now, that was good. All right. So
well, hey, give shouts to Huddle Up Podcast, Big Jim Neese, for providing the bell. He just said, I got that on Amazon one day. It's a thing that happened. Oh, yeah, Huddle Up Podcast.
Yeah, there it is. There it is. So honestly, Jeff, at first I thought that it was non-contact because I kind of caught the back half of the play in like the last couple of seconds. But upon watching the sideline footage that was provided by Andrew Cherico, I saw that he caught a pass from Jordan Ivy Curry on the elbow, and he tried to drive and get into the chest of his defender. So the contact was there, and it was immediately after that he dropped the ball and started limping towards the court's timeline. And then obviously he fell and was face down in obvious agony for several minutes. And yeah, I mean, that place got very quiet. You know, it was a very energetic crowd for an exhibition match. And yeah, you could only hear the fluttering of, a few voices during that time. And it was a scary moment for this Knights team. I mean, we're talking about a player that was their leading scorer last year. I mean, he's a catalyst for their offense and a leader, stepping into his senior season. But it seems like, I mean, based on his Twitter post, he's optimistic that he'll be back soon. That's the vibe that I got. But yeah, that's what I saw from up there in section 108 for media seating.
Andrew reported he's experienced back issues before, but I can't tell if it's that or something else. Obviously I have no information personally on this, except for the fact that if it is a back problem, thinking back to my personal back problems that I've had, that is exactly how I would have reacted if I turned in a certain way. So, I mean, again, we don't know exactly what it was, but like, I don't know. I kind of, watching what happened, I kind of felt like, oh my God, if that's what that was, like my heart goes out to him because I know how horrible that is. So I'm glad to hear that at least he's optimistic about it. We'll keep an eye on it. And the Knights still have a couple weeks to go before the season starts against Texas A&M on November 4th. And no doubt, that'll be the storyline, at least the active storyline coming in. Now, let's talk about the game. UCF beat FGCU 92-78. Again, it was an exhibition. Kind of a shaky first half. And again, I'm going to preface this by repeating what Eric Lopez said last week. Don't look too far into it. But
in other words, the game means squat.
There's his audio. There we go.
Yeah, there he is. The microphone works now. But FGCU, they treated it looked like to me like they were treating it like a real game, at least in terms of the first half. They hit, I think, 10 threes in the first half. They were shooting the lights out. And then the second half, it looked like UCF kind of like all the things that weren't working. They looked very uneven, kind of angular and awkward in the first half. And then it was like after halftime, they kind of settled in. And they're like, okay, we get this. Keyshawn Hall, I thought, played pretty well. You shouted him out on your article, 23 points, 13 rebounds. Kind of a quiet 23 almost. It felt like, his first half was was a little uneven, and then he really turned around in the second half. So what impressed you the most about the team in general, and then some of the other newcomers as well?
Well, I talked to Coach Dawkins post-game about how the team reflected the process of building their chemistry and the continuity. And he said that they did a good job, and they did. And yeah, it was a shaky first half. I'm sure they were excited to get out there. It's that time of year, we're on the cusp of the season starting. And they had some things to work through. And yeah, that included Keyshawn Hall. I mean, I believe his first half numbers were 1 of 5 with a couple of turnovers. He really turned that around. He showed this propensity to be able to get into the lane and finish through contact. He displayed savvy handles, and 9 of 10 from the line, and some of those were and one opportunities. And we understand that can make all the difference in a game. 1 or 2 possessions. Is it turning into a 2 or 3 point play?
Could have been why that 23 was so quiet, Jeff, is because he's getting that many from the line. Not something we saw a lot of last year, by the way.
That's true.
Yeah, that's a good point from Kyle, and I think that they're going to need that moving forward. But yeah, Keyshawn was awesome. But beyond him, I mean, Mustafa, great first game. I believe he had 8 points, several rebounds, and it was strong on the defensive end, a couple of blocks. He showed the physicality. And another thing that Coach Dawkins talked about at the media day was Mustafa's strength that he's starting to build up. And that's going to be important in a very strong basketball conference. You're going to have to show physicality down low. And I know we didn't see it on display in this exhibition, but based on pregame workouts, he also has some range. So we might see a couple of 3-point attempts here and there.
Yeah, Oh, go ahead, Don. I'm sorry.
No. I was just going to say real quick. Also, Benny Williams, very good job on his part. He was a dominant force playing at seemingly at points like a stretch 5 position. They were running a lot of small ball with him as the singular big man down low. But I think that the newcomers contributed in a big way. But go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I was going to say about Mustafa Cham is, you saw the athleticism, you saw the range. He was credited with 2 blocks, but he affected way more shots.
Yes.
When he was around the hoop. And he showed, I thought, like a little bit of frustration at some plays that he missed. And I was kind of like, okay, that's kind of like that freshman happening, right? Like, oh, I should have made it. I was like, hey, man, it's okay. You don't have to be perfect right out the bat. It's totally fine. And one other guy I thought I was pretty impressed with, it was kind of like under the radar, was Dior Johnson. Yes. Even though, the backup point guard, even though he wasn't, he didn't, stuff the stat sheet on defense, just watching him play, I thought he was in control of the defense too. He was directing everything. He was calling out screeners and everything. And one of the things that I mentioned to somebody at the game was like, he looks like the kind of defender, like a defensive specialist, like the kind of defender that when he lines up in front of you, you're like, oh no, not this guy. He is so freaking annoying. And I love that. So
I have to point out, Jeff, if he has this much of an impact, think about this. The stat we're not pointing out that we should. Only 18 minutes of play, and he's jumped off the court like that. That's exactly
there are some guys that just stand out when you see him. So what did you think? What were some of the other highlights for you, Don, among some of those other players?
Well, to kind of touch on Dior, I mean, he was a special player at JUCO. Obviously, he averaged 45 a game. And, you know, I think he's out to prove himself. I think he has a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. And this team is characterized by defensive identity. And he showed that he's willing to play tough on both sides of the ball. You know, he's long, athletic. I feel like he can play multiple positions with his size. And he was making a healthy living in the mid range game. I mean, he's very savvy, 15 footers and stuff, like nice handles. And they're going to need another scoring threat like that. They're going to need 3-level scorers against this stiff competition in this conference. I mean, at opening with Texas A&M too, it's not even the easiest non-conference slate. So I think also one thing that stood out to me was, yes, FGCU hit, what would you say it was, Jeff? I think it was like 10 threes in the first half.
Yeah, it ended up being more than that, but I thought I looked up, it was like 10 or 11 threes. I don't know the exact number, but it was somewhere around there.
Yeah, they were hitting at about a 50% clip from what I
Yeah.
remember, but I believe they finished the game 12 of 33. So UCF really put the clamps on the perimeter, and I think a lot of their defensive aggression and effort was manifested initially by that Niels chase down block. I mean, that was a la LeBron 2016. Like, that was such a hustle play, and that was a very athletic play. And if you remember, I mean, the Eagles retained the rebound, but then Benny came with the help and denied them again.
Yeah.
And I think that set the tone for the rest of the game. And I think that while Coach Dawkins expressed that he wasn't pleased with how many 3-pointers they gave up, that is a positive sign going forward. And a lot of that came from, new contributions and new additions to this team.
And that's the point I wanted to make too, Don. Like, we're used to this group having good perimeter defense, and I get Coach Dawkins calling out, you let them make 10 threes. And I think that's kind of the biggest weakness to his defensive approach. We've seen the Dolphins of Jacksonville. No, I'm not getting my NFL teams mixed up. The Dolphins of Jacksonville come in and nearly beat this team in seasons past because they just had a hot night shooting. But the fact that offensively they were able to deliver threes from the perimeter, Jeff, we haven't seen anything like that. That kind of shooting ability since, I would argue, Darren Green and Brandon Mahan were a duo. Okay.
Yeah.
So seeing that come from the arc is amazing. One more question I want to ask of you, Jeff. Keyshawn Hall, whispers of CJ Kelly type action there, right? An oversized guard that's coming in, filling a gap right there when Sellers falls down on the floor and is stepping in big the way CJ Kelly did, getting a lot of rebounds, leading the team in rebounding, by the way, and then even coming in at times big when they needed that third point guard when Jalen Young was a thing. I'm going to be looking for Keyshawn Hall. He's got my attention, definitely.
I wouldn't put him in the CJ Kelly category because CJ was much more of a slasher. He was a smaller player, more
I'm talking
slight.
about the presence and stepping in the way that he did.
Well, he's Keyshawn Hall is 6'7", 235.
Mm-hmm.
He's a big dude. He kind of reminded me of a smaller Keith Clanton.
Okay, you're going way
Okay,
back.
he much more of a post threat. Yeah, he'll face you up, but he's he kind of has that. He kind of has that because of his size. Almost like a stretch 3, if you will. Last question for Don. What's this team got to work on based on what you saw? Obviously, we talked about the 3-point shooting, but what were some things that you thought? There's a couple things that might be a real concern here.
I don't know if I would characterize anything as a real concern. I mean, this was the first exhibition game. There's a lot of new pieces, obviously, and they're still building. The core element here is the chemistry and the continuity. I would like to see more on-ball defense and timely transitions on the perimeter. Now, I don't want to make that sound like a criticism because they really stepped it up in the second half. I mean, again, let's highlight it. 12 for 33 after this team hit 10 threes in the first half, that being the Eagles. And I just feel that once they can really tighten down transition help, switching, and just quick on-ball defense to trap them on the perimeter and force them to give up the ball and just, force teams to always make the extra pass and then see if you can turn that into turnovers, because somewhere along the line, if you put enough pressure on teams, they're going to get sloppy and you can exploit that. But outside of that, I think that it's a team that will be a work in progress. It's a very deep guard room. You know, we got to see a little bit of Mikey Williams even, and he played well. Jordan Ivy Curry, it wasn't his strongest shooting night, but he led the team with 6 assists. So really just communicating defensively to make sure that the help is there and that the timely switches are there. But other than that, I liked what I seen. I mean, 92 points and FGCU. I mean, this isn't no disrespect at all, but this isn't a Rollins College. I mean, this is a team that has, you know, gone deep in the tournament. They've proven themselves as a D1 program. And like you said, they came out there serious. They came out playing fast, up-tempo ball, good ball movement. They were ready to play, and they were punching UCF in the mouth a little bit at first. But those adjustments, you know, especially on the back of losing Jaylin Sellers, were big time. And I'm excited to see how they carry that to Texas A&M.
So we're hoping the best for Jaylin Sellers, and we're also hoping the best for and I will say this: Darius Johnson looked like Darius Johnson. Except what's funny about that is that he didn't really have to handle the ball that much.
Oh,
he has a lot of help in that backcourt now, which I think will probably allow him to shoot the ball a lot more too.
Yeah, he was their perimeter hot hand, and I mean UCF shot well from the 3. They were 8 of 18, but he accounted for 5 of those, 5 of 8 overall, and I believe he had the 5 assists as well. So I mean, he really stepped up, and also another aggressive defensive player, just really hounding guys. It might not have shown up in the stat sheet, but he was a really strong presence.
All right. Next game for UCF is going to be at Stegeman Coliseum, another exhibition at Georgia in a little bit more than a week, October 29th, 7 p.m. at Stegeman Coliseum. Don, where can people find you as you will be covering UCF basketball this year for us?
Main place you can find me for all the latest and updated coverage, Don Documents 407 on Twitter or X, however you want to refer to it as. Also follow the Black and Gold Banneret on all socials. I will be contributing there as well. And thank you guys for having me.
To contribute there as well. One last thing, Jeff, before we end the segment, no matter what happens to young Jaylin, we are all still buyers in Sellers.
Okay.
Dude, the player like that forced it. You're the problem now. You can go on Black and Gold Banneret YouTube channel and see it for yourself.
Okay. All right, Don, thanks again, man. Good to talk to you. We'll see you at the next one, all right?
All right, thanks for having me, guys.
All right. All right. Let's move over to football. Kyle and Eric here. All right. Well, this is starting to look eerily similar to last year. 3 wins in a row for UCF, followed by 4 losses in a row in what has to have been. Well, I mean, you guys kind of, I listened to the show, and I think everyone kind of agrees at this point. Even now that the dust has settled, just one of the most infuriating losses in recent memory to a top 10 team that at the end of the day was gettable.
I'm not quite there, but I understand the frustration in the moment with the recency bias.
Well, when you lose a game where you have a according to, again, I know how you feel about advanced metrics, how you both feel about them, okay? But when you have a 99% chance of winning the game, and you need one first down.
Oh, geez, here we go. Here we go.
And then you lose the game in the final 30 seconds. I mean, that is frustrating, but
that's adorable. But please remember, this team was a 17-point underdog.
I get it.
Advanced metrics. I love the 99%. So why play the last 5 minutes of the game then? What's the point?
Because there's a 1% chance.
Well, no, it's nonsensical. That's a nonsensical Here's what you need to do. Throw all the advanced metrics and throw it out to the garbage. Throw it out to the sea. It means nothing. It's the most absurd thing. The only thing that's more hilarious is when somebody says, well, they have an 80% chance of winning because they're up 2 touchdowns in the first half. Well, then why bother play in the second half? Give me a break. But anyway, here's the reality.
Here's the other reality that I think is is interesting. We'll go with that adjective, even though it's lost all meaning. So number 11 BYU comes to town on Saturday, 3:30 kick. It's homecoming. The spread on this game, guys, according to ESPN, UCF is a 2-point underdog, and with a 54.5% chance of winning the game. That's according to ESPN. Should be good weather. Might be a little rainy, 82 degrees. This is undefeated 7-0 and number 11 BYU. Not the first time BYU.
Oh, here we
Not
go.
the first time that BYU has come to
Iowa State, Eric. Where was that?
Not the first time that BYU has come to Orlando. We saw them in 2014, beat them in overtime. Eric says that they are overrated. Why?
Because they're not playing at home. No team in the Big 12 has a better home field advantage than BYU. The best home field advantage by far. I mean, anybody that's been to Provo, Utah for a game, just like they foam at the mouth and how beautiful it is in the atmosphere. It's incredible. So that's why I think Vegas is still skeptical on BYU, because can that carry over to the road, especially in this case where BYU is traveling east? And remember, they just nearly lost to a bad Oklahoma State team at home. So I think there's still some skeptics out there, BYU. I actually think they're pretty good. I was being more sarcastic. I do agree. I think BYU and Iowa State are a little fraudulent. I think we discussed this, Kyle, about Iowa State on Saturday. I think they got exposed. They're not a top 10, top 15 team.
They did not.
I'll say before you get in, I will say one thing that I think you mentioned last week about Iowa State. Matt Campbell is squeezing every last drop of the juice out of that orange. That's a really well-coached team.
This is what he does, man. Yeah. This is what he does. That Matt Campbell is a fantastic coach. And listen, I don't know how they're keeping him at Ames, but God bless them for pulling it off. You know,
I don't think they're stupid. I think they know exactly.
No, with all due respect, I hear what you're saying. Well, they're paying him. Well, yes, Jeff. But if somebody else who's a bigger name program is finding themselves in need to outbid Ames, Iowa, I don't think that's a struggle. Yet 100%. somehow they've kept him from getting poached. That's my point, Jeff.
Well, I think Matt, too, is smart in that I'm not just going to bolt for any job. I think he understands
he can pick.
He can kind of pick and choose. Plus, there's not the pressure at Iowa State because they're actually, realistic, unlike many fan bases across college football, in that, last year Iowa State had a couple.
Talking about there anyway.
Iowa State had a couple tough years. They didn't oh my God. You know what they did? They actually built the team to this year. A lot of these players are back from last year. It's the old school way of, hey, let's recruit and develop these guys. It's a crazy concept. I think many college coaches should try that in college football nowadays. By the way.
Okay, Lopez, come on.
Anyway, but I think so. That's the thing. He maxed them up. But you're right about this, Kyle, because Iowa State does not have money. They're on Power 4 only on name because they were put there like 100 years ago. They're really a G5 operating in a Power 4. So credit to them for doing it. And honestly, you could argue that's a basketball school first anyway. They care a little. Some would argue they care more about hoop. No, they do. I mean, we'll find out the hard way when UCF goes to Iowa State in hoops this year.
Let's flip it over to BYU, because right now, as I'm looking at it, their best win on the season was on the road at SMU. 18-15.
Kyle's favorite team, the SMU Mustangs.
We're not accounting for Kansas State in here. We're actually going to think SMU is a bigger deal.
Well, that was it. Well, as Eric mentioned, really, that was at home.
Excuse me. You mean the biggest road win they have is SMU? That I will sign up for. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't mean to discount the Kansas State game, but to me, a road win against a ranked team is more impressive than a home win against a ranked team.
Now, in Kyle's defense, they destroyed Kansas State. Absolutely obliterated.
Oh, they flattened them,
And that's when people took notice of BYU. And listen, I'm not saying BYU shouldn't be favored against UCF or maybe even a wider margin. I think people question what can BYU bring on the road, and against UCF, who's probably the more desperate team situation there. So we'll see. I think that's why the spread's a little low.
I think there's recency bias. You touched on it too, Best Elo, just in passing, but it's accurate that this week Oklahoma State should not have been in that football game, and I appreciate people questioning BYU. I'm not going to go so far as to say frauds, but there are games later in their schedule where we will see which direction they go.
Yeah. Well, we know about the quarterback at BYU, Retzlaff, who leads them in both passing, obviously, and rushing. He's rushed for He's rushed for 265 yards in the air, which is not all that great. As I'm looking at BYU right now, they are fairly consistent across the board, not an overly impressive offense, 73rd in rushing, 56th in passing, 62nd overall.
However,
they're averaging 35 points a game, which is top 25 in the country. Defense is 30th in total. Pretty good against the pass at 25th. But the thing is about BYU is this is a tautology, of course, but like they just BYU you to death.
I mean, they have a lot of balance, Jeff. They're
Yeah.
not bad in any particular piece. And here's the part I think that's the biggest deal. If you're to break down what the three most important concepts of a football team are, it's A, the quarterback, protecting the quarterback, and getting the other guy's quarterback, Jeff. That's number 3. And according to Coach Malzahn at today's press conference, which you can find on the Black Gold Banner YouTube channel, the edge rushing, the defensive ends are dangerous. And whereas UCF was able to keep in and had a good chance to win, let's not BS, Iowa State, with that edge pressure, if the tackles have a bad game at all or take a particular down off, it could spell disaster, as that's the kind of thing that could cause a turnover for a young Ja'Cory Brown.
The other news, and perfect segue, Kyle, on Ja'Cory Brown, Gus Malzahn came out in the press conference today and said, we're riding Ja'Cory the rest of the year. Right. Officially named him the starter. Last time out against Iowa State, it was erratic. 8 of, at least through the air, 8 of 20, 62 yards, 2 interceptions. Rushing, he had the big 67-yard touchdown, which was really impressive. Let's not deny it. And he carried the ball 13 times for 154 yards and 2 touchdowns. This is in addition to the nearly 200-yard game that RJ Harvey had. And yet, what really hurt was just the lack of the passing game and at times his inaccuracy. Let's be fair. That's, there were a couple of opportunities that UCF needed that he couldn't convert through the air.
Yeah, well, I got to push back on one thing, and I didn't bring this up on the Night Shift podcast, well, I probably could. And we talked about Ja'Cory in the passing game and his ability to run playing on the Night Shift podcast. But the part that I think that big run, as much as people want to just completely destroy play calling, that was a play calling win. There was a single point of attack that they had in for Ja'Cory to take off. To Ja'Cory's credit, the dude's a fantastic athlete. Hey, Eric Lopez, tell me if you've heard this one before. A Gus Malzahn quarterback, awesome athlete.
Are you sure we're allowed to compliment play calling? You tell me.
I know I'm going out.
I will say, even with that play, he was really impressive, in ways that KJ Jefferson was not on the ground. Because even if you take the other play away, he's averaging over 7 yards a carry, which is exactly what you need to do in this kind of situation.
That's the difference between the two quarterbacks. I think Gus was relying on KJ Jefferson to just kind of shrug off rushers, in the fact,
he would just put his head down
of a Viking giant. We saw him shake off a defensive end in the TCU game. It's not that that's unimpressive. It's just not what the Knights need right now. I mean, bottom line. But I don't think that's going to come quite as easy. This is the part where I'm going to start leaning Eric Lopez's way. Now there's enough film to really see what the problem is. Okay. And I go with this concept to say, and I asked Coach about this at the presser today. He mentioned post game, we just need to hit the pass. I think he said that phrase a number of times. But I asked him if we're talking about getting more balance to the offense. I asked him directly if completing more passes would also be complementary to getting the defense off the field, right? 37 and a half minutes of time. And he said, yeah, our biggest problem for the defense was that the offense wasn't converting enough on third down. Jeff is losing his mind, and I love it. Here, I'll calm you back down. 2 defensive turnovers for touchdowns last week. See, now Jeff's okay again. But I mean, listen, all these jokes aside, like, that's the biggest deal. 62 yards in the game is not going to do it.
Yeah, and that second half, I think that what got Iowa State back in the game was the fact that they couldn't keep the defense off the field to get that rest. Go ahead, Eric.
Well, look, we're focusing on the offense. I think the positives and why I think UCF has a puncher shot to beat BYU, and still get to Kyle's goal, a dream of going to a bowl, a sponsored bowl game somewhere. Is
They're all sponsored, I should say, but anyway.
that's why I said sponsored bowl game.
That's the joke.
You know, you look at Brandon Adams. I thought Brandon Adams played his best game of his career. I thought he was fantastic
He was
in the
great.
secondary. I thought Dotson was really good up front.
Yeah.
So I think you're seeing some guys defensively play there. I think we're starting to see some young guys also inserted in the lineup. So
and real quick, Eric, too. Shout out to Lee Hunter, who played the game of his life chasing around that Iowa State quarterback. I think he got, Kyle, 1 sack, but he probably could have had about 5 more.
I would say, I think he would disagree with you about the game of his life thing, because I know he's kicking himself.
I know, but he was, for a defensive tackle to cause that much pressure on a quarterback, I thought was a hell of a performance. That's the
defense's way, man. But let me use Dotson to segue over to this too real quick, Eric Lopez. Gus Malzahn also made it official. John Walker is having surgery. He is, in fact, done for the year.
Shocked. We wish him the best.
Well, and listen, I know your first thing, and I'm not calling it full conspiracy theory, but I know you've already assumed that he's traveled on to Boston College or something.
Not me. No, I mean,
I think that listen, knee injuries are a thing, man, and sometimes when you're a bigger guy, you need that to get right. Don't be surprised if he's wearing a knee brace for the rest of his career.
Yeah, I mean, boy, it would have been really nice to have him.
Somebody said that here on this show before.
I also acknowledged that he in the lineup wouldn't change a damn thing.
So let me put it before. Eric,
you're loving that too, but I had to say it.
Don't encourage him, Kyle. So I'll start with you, Eric. Where is the weak point on BYU that UCF can exploit?
That's a good question. I thought Kyle made a great point. They don't have a big flaw. They may not be, like, whoa, they blow you away in the secondary or anything like that, but they're well coached. Sataki has done a great job there at BYU. They have been waiting for this moment. Not that UCF and Cincinnati, Houston have it, but BYU has waited for years to get to a conference like the Big 12, and they look prepared on all their sports, football in particular, that this was the goal. They have a gorgeous stadium. The facilities are beautiful. He's done a nice job.
Notre Dame aside, of all the independents, they were the best prepared. They were basically another power school that was just acting as an independent, right?
And they've got the right coach. Sataki's done a very nice job there. And again, last year they took their lumps. Lost some close games, couldn't win on the road. Remember, they lost that wacky game to Oklahoma State. They were under 500. They stayed the course, brought a lot of those guys back, added the quarterback, which, again, let's highlight the quarterback. If you have a good quarterback, it really solves a lot of your problems. Let's just and I think that's what we're finding out in the state of Florida this year. That's the theme, is that. And they got this young man that, Jeff, you mentioned earlier. He's played very well. I would not hire him as a football analyst because he said today in the media press conference that he called UCF a top 5 team in the country type. I would not agree with that, but I don't know what tape he's watching. Maybe he's watching a different year. But nonetheless, hey, that's cool that we got all that respect.
If he thinks UCF is a top 5 team in the country, you know what? Hey, kudos to him for preparing that hard.
Between that and Matt Campbell saying it's the most athletic team he's going to see all year. We don't need like, guys, do you want to make the playoffs? This is not the way to make the argument to make the playoffs, is by saying that UCF is the most athletic team you've faced all year or a top 5 team. But that's going to be interesting to me how BYU athletically matches up with UCF. Can they block a UCF? Can we see that? Was Iowa State what we saw from the push from the Hunter and Dotson, those guys? Is that an aberration or a trend? And that's what I'm interested to see this Saturday against BYU, which also has a very good line because their coach, emphasizes a lot line play, which that's Kyle's dream right there.
Oh, Kyle, yeah. Where's the pressure point?
Well, I mean, for me, I'm going to take it to the other side offensively on the trenches here, too. Listen, I know Kittler got back at center, and they had a really good game on the offensive line, in my opinion. How can you say it any other way? Even Adrian Medley said today in the weekly presser that the O-line put the team on their back and did their part. Yeah. 3 runs of 40 yards or more. That is an offensive line driven game.
Best job that they've done since the second half of TCU.
I'll allow that. Yeah, absolutely. Do I think that this Iowa State front was as good? No. Do I think that they were 100%? They probably had some injuries in there somewhere too or something. But here's what I will say. The key to this, and I kind of discussed this with Adrian Medley a bit myself, asking about it. Like, the key is going to get, when I hear good edge rushers, I hear guys desperate to pin their ears back and over pursue. And that's the good news for Ja'Cory Brown's mobility. I think if it's me, Gus, if you're listening, I would come out throwing just like you did with Iowa State, because they're going to come out, right? What's the Deion Sanders line, Eric Lopez? Even going to throw my mama in the box, try to stop RJ Harvey. Come out throwing, confuse them, keep them off balance. And we touched on a bit on this on Night Shift, Eric Lopez. I think Iowa State over-respected UCF's pass game just because they were bleeding trying it. I don't know that they've gotten to 20 passes other than TCU in a desperate scenario, right? So I feel like keeping those defensive ends honest is going to be the key for production. In order to do that, got to have more than 62 passing yards.
Yeah. TV for this game, Elo.
ESPN. Yes,
ESPN.
That means they'll be on site. We'll have on-site announcers. That's a
3:30. Do we know who's doing the game?
Yes. So Mike Cousins is doing the game with, I believe, Brock Osweiler.
Really?
They've done UCF before, because I've met Brock in our
normally he
press box.
works. Brock normally works with Dave Fleming.
Right.
But Fleming, I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe Fleming is on assignment. He might be doing like World Series stuff, like as far as like international broadcast or something to that.
Right. Yeah.
But so Cousins is filling in, as I understand. Then Stormy Butami will be the sideline reporter for this game. So I believe that's from what I saw is the crew. By the way, one positive from a UCF fan standpoint, you cannot complain about this, because obviously we found out earlier Arizona's kickoff will also be a 3:30 kick. No noon games this year.
Space game, 3:30 kick for UCF and Arizona.
No noon games. You had the two exhibition games that were at night to start the year. Listen, I mean, that's it was what it was. Colorado 3:30. You've got Cincinnati 3:30, I believe, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now this game 3:30, and then the 3, and then Utah's going to be a night game at Black Friday. So I think from an attendance standpoint and a fan experience standpoint, you cannot complain about the way the schedule played out from a TV time start standpoint. 3:30.
Can I give you one more from an atmosphere standpoint?
Sure.
3:30 kick is the ideal kick for UCF in the fall, because the weather starts to get a little bit cooler and you get that beautiful sunset. And let me tell you something, how much they like showing that sunset in all the socials and on TV, and look at how pretty it is, right? I mean, it's you sell what you sell, right? So Arizona, Saturday, November 2nd. That's right before daylight savings. So we won't get quite that.
Now,
maybe we
the
might.
Arizona game will be an FS1 game, so 50-50 shot that the broadcasters will be on site or not. I mean, that's who knows that. Don't expect a big audience for that, just like don't expect a big audience for this Iowa State game that took place. But BYU is interesting. BYU has a draw, and I'm wondering if you're Brett Yormark, I think his dream Big 12 title game is BYU Colorado. I think that's
especially at this point with that being hurt. Yeah.
I think
I think if he were to get Colorado, which is not out of the question. I mean, I think Colorado would probably have to win out to get to the Big 12 title game and get some help, which is possible. But I think that would get them the most viewership in the Big 12 title game. I don't think people across the country will give 2 cents about Iowa State versus Kansas.
I forget if I told you off air. I don't know. Colorado's starting to heat up.
Uh-oh.
I know. The Baylor game and then the game against us. Listen, I'll be the first to admit I was dead wrong. I was not a believer in Colorado at the start of the year. I was not a believer.
Are you as floored as I am? Right?
I am. I'm about to fall down on the bed.
Listen, they've won 4 of their last 5. They played K-State tough in the one loss.
Yeah.
They are whatever it is that they needed to click that wasn't clicking last year, it is clicking now.
Young O linemen improve throughout the year, and that's
again,
what
it's chemistry though. Again, you can't have constant roster turnover and expect that things to click right away on certain things.
They had a lot of roster turnover,
but in the O line. But Kyle mentioned it. They addressed the O line. One of their best prospects they have on that team is the freshman offensive lineman that people think will be a future pro, and he had no O line play at all last year. Now, they've also been a little healthier this year. Now, he did lose Travis Hunter for half that Kansas State game. Probably cost him that game.
Yeah.
So they haven't been hurt by the injury bug yet. But their line is a lot better. Pat Shermer has done a better job with short passing to protect the Shador. And their defense is way better than last year. That young D coordinator guy is going to become a name because I don't think they have a ton of talent on that side of the ball. But, boy, they play well. We saw that up close. In person. So I think they're in the right direction. If they can beat Cincinnati, they'll be bowl eligible for the first time, I believe, in 7 years.
They got Cincinnati at home, and then here's their schedule the rest of the way. All right. You talked about what they got left at Texas Tech.
Tricky because it's Lubbock.
It's Lubbock, but that might be the only landmine that they face because then they're home for Utah.
It was barely banged up and damaged right now.
Utah is treading water right now, and they just replaced their offensive coordinator. At Kansas, which Kansas doesn't even have a home field right now.
I wonder if that's in Arrowhead. Wouldn't that be something if Deion's coaching at Arrowhead? Huh?
I think it's going to be at Arrowhead. Did you see the attendance for the last Kansas game at Arrowhead? There were more people on the field.
Well, in fairness, I mean, basketball season is about to tip off.
And then they finish, and then Colorado finishes at home against Oklahoma State.
It's a favorable schedule. It's a favorable schedule where I don't know if it'll be good enough to get to a Big 12 title game, but I think it'll be 8-9 wins. I think BYU, and break down the BYU schedule. If they can get out of Orlando with a win, I think BYU could be in the driver's seat to get to the Big 12 title game. And who would have thought back in August when we'd be talking about a team from the state of Utah that's ranked competing for the Big 12 championship, it turns out it's the one in Provo and not in Salt Lake.
Yeah.
Here's what BYU's got there at us. All right. At Utah. Now I know you're gonna again. We said
it's a rivalry game. That's a rivalry game.
Yes. Especially that one.
Throw the holy wall.
That
holy
is
wall.
That I don't know if you. I mean, you guys have seen this game. That is one of the most personal rivalry games I've ever seen. I would be afraid to be there.
Yeah.
Home for Kansas. At Arizona State, that's another one that kind of that could be a little troublesome. They should win it.
Which game? Who they got?
At Arizona State.
Yeah.
It's a long trip, Jeff, but let's be honest. If they lost that, they should be disappointed.
I agree. Yeah. But it's a bit of a minefield. It's not as hard as the Utah game, but that's the speed bump. And then home for Houston and Houston.
Energy being spent in the Utah game, that game being.
But I think if BYU were to beat UCF and split Utah and Arizona State and then win their home game against Houston, one loss in the league, that should probably be good enough because they do have the tiebreaker over Kansas State.
Here's the issue. You have two undefeated teams at the top in BYU and Iowa State. Now I know you guys are not impressed with Iowa State, but there they are.
What's their schedule?
And then at 3-1, well, let me just list the 4 3-1 teams, which are Kansas State, Cincinnati, Colorado, Texas Tech, Cincinnati.
I think Texas Tech and Cincinnati are fraudulent. So
the Kansas State, if I had to, would be the one team that I'm like, okay, that they look like they could be a problem.
They are.
Looking at Iowa State real quick, after the win against us, they have 5 games left. They are home for Texas Tech, at Kansas, home for Cincy, at Utah, home for Kansas State to finish it up. That could be a play-in game for the championship game.
That could be, and that's also a very backloaded schedule for Iowa State.
Not for nothing, too. Kansas State having the tiebreak over Colorado is absolutely
huge. Yeah. I think it's funny. I think if it wasn't for that BYU game in Provo, I think everybody would say Kansas State's the best team in the Big 12, but they got so destroyed by BYU in Provo. And they were fortunate to beat Colorado on the road there last minute. So I'm interested to see how BYU comes out. Orlando, we'll see. The good news for them, I think it'll be a good crowd, but I also think that means we're going to get a lot of BYU fans in attendance.
Well, I mean, They pay the same amount that everyone else does. By the way, Kansas State's schedule, home for Kansas, again, a rivalry game, at Houston, home for Arizona State, home for Cincinnati, and then at Iowa State, like we mentioned. So
it's a very good schedule for K-State. You're right. That Iowa State K-State game could be
really
huge.
good month of November in this conference, man. I'm telling you.
Man.
Kyle,
you're not really gonna miss much when we're hosting Utah. It turns out while you're with family.
Woo! I still think you got. Feel free to call me crazy, Eric. I know you're gonna laugh at me. I really don't care. I still think this team can get to a bowl game.
Whoa!
UCF, yeah, it's on the table.
Absolutely, is on the table.
Whoopie-doo.
The remaining 5 games are home for BYU, home for Arizona, at Arizona State, at West Virginia, home for Utah. I think there are at least 3 wins in there.
Which are?
Arizona.
Arizona.
Say that again, Kyle.
Arizona State, Arizona, and I think you're taking the Utah game as a third, right?
Oh, I'm taking West Virginia.
Oh, God, no. I think that's a bad matchup. I think UCF has a problem there with trench warfare.
Not to mention the games in Morgantown.
That's okay. I still think that's a winnable game.
I didn't say winnable. I just mean I wouldn't hang my hat on that.
Oh, all right, let's rank them. Let's rank them here. Would we? Okay. It sounds like we all agreed. Would we say Arizona? If you had to rank them, Arizona, maybe the best shot, considering that's kind of become a mess there. Clearly, the coaching change from Jed Fish to Brennan is obviously had an impact.
I would rank Arizona is the most gettable game, space game at home. And like you said,
it sounds silly, but I think the fact that it's the space game actually matters.
Yeah. Sure. So what would you guys put next?
Arizona State.
Really?
I need to know the stat. Well, here's
hold on. Let me stop you right there because I knew you were going to throw the road here, Jeff. This team on the road has not played that bad, and no, I'm not.
You're right about that
because it's within the state, and I know everybody. Oh, well, Gus's had an awful road record. We're not talking about him having to play a Mikey Keene against Navy, for example, okay, who I thought was supposed to be sliced bread, but that's a separate thread. Listen, the punchline's this group coming back to beat TCU again, I know, and at the time overrated TCU team, playing arguably their best game against a team that might be in the conference championship. I can't rule out that they go to Lubbock and handle business playing good defense once again.
Okay.
Or not Lubbock.
Right. The Arizona State has so many questions. Who's going to be the quarterback at Arizona State? Their starter got hurt, Levitt. Mm-hmm. He's out a few weeks. Their backup Sims, who you remember is the former Georgia Tech quarterback, who can't.
Yeah, Jeff Sims. That's right.
So he started this weekend when they lost at Cincinnati. So
didn't we beat him up there?
Yes.
We beat him in Georgia Tech as well.
So the question is, who's the quarterback for Arizona State? By the time UCF gets there, might answer that question.
Okay, so both of you guys think Arizona State is the second most gettable game.
I'm not as confident as Kyle. I'm not as confident as Kyle is about it because
what's the one you're confident on, Eric?
I actually think Utah. I don't think Utah. I just Zach Wilson's brother has not impressed me. They've had their own issues offensively.
And we know. I mean, this is evidenced by the fact that you refer to him as Zach Wilson's brother. But anyway,
yeah, it's true. The offensive coordinator resigned, or whatever you want to say, got pushed out
to resign.
And the team that is they've won multiple Pac-12 championships. A lot of those players that have played in the Rose Bowl, they're not going to have a shot, it looks like, for the Big 12 title game. So I don't know what their motivation will be when they come down to Orlando on Thanksgiving weekend. I think UCF can handle Utah's offense. Now, Kyle Whittingham is very good coach. So I'm not saying they're a physical team, so I get all that. But I could see UCF. I think UCF will win one of these games against the Utah teams. Either BYU, which if you look at a lot of the BYU, there's some similarities between last year's Oklahoma State game where they come out of remember that? Like everybody's like, wow, why is Oklahoma State only a 2-point favorite or whatever? And then UCF ran all over them. This could be that version of that, or the Utah game. I think BYU is the better, healthier team, so I would rank Utah as a more gettable game than BYU, but it wouldn't shock me. Look, they can win. All these games are winnable. They're winnable. They also are losable. And I know that sounds like a cop-out, but that really is in a nutshell. Like, there is not a game that you're like, oh, they got no chance. but there's also not a game that you're like, oh, I feel really super duper cocky that I'm putting the mortgage on this game.
Yeah, Eric, I mean, that's the point we made earlier in the season here on the Night Shift podcast early on back in August, is how this team would do was dependent on their first 5-game start. And frankly, that 3-2 was the beginning of things going the wrong way, bottom line. And then the Cincinnati game, nobody had that as a loss on their schedule.
Yeah.
I think that, listen,
That
people,
one hurts looking back on it.
It's the most disappointing game. No, that Cincinnati loss to me is the most disappointing game.
Kyle, what would you put you would put Utah, I'm guessing, as the third one?
I would.
Okay.
The only Eric's selling me a little bit on it being gettable, but the reason why I put it as the third one is because you got a lot of guys, to your point, Eric Lopez, that have been at higher levels of success. The last thing they want is their last game be that last loss to UCF. The way, just if
you could make the same case about us at home on senior day, like,
right, but what element, and I hear where you're going with that, but I don't know that they're made up of as many transfers, Utah, as is UCF, so I think it's less of a factor.
Are you guys, I'm going to assume that the both of you feel like the BYU game, despite it being at home, is the least gettable.
That's where I'm at.
Eric?
I think they're a bad match.
Let me instead of saying least gettable, I should say toughest task.
Toughest task.
Probably because they're the best team on the schedule left, right?
And
so I think that's
I'll
the
preface this. Forgive me, Eric. I'm sorry, but I'll preface this by saying, yes, the game against West Virginia is in Morgantown, but it's coming off of a bye week.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of good that helped us against Colorado. That really helped. I would say this, why I agree with Kyle in the West Virginia.
I would rather play West Virginia coming off of a bye week than not.
The problem is West Virginia, what happened last year is they ran all over UCF, to Kyle's point, which is what Kyle's concerned about. Now you're moving that game to Morgantown late November. We don't know what the weather will be like. Now, on the opposite end, to Jeff's point, things are not looking good for Neil Brown.
No,
it's not good either. So that fan base might turn on him, and they may check out on him by that point. So that's what I'm saying. This is kind of.
Yeah, they're 3-4. Their only wins so far were against Albany, Kansas, which we've already talked about, and then at Oklahoma State. They were handled pretty easily by Iowa State and got boat raced by Kansas State at home. And those are in back-to-back home games too, Kyle.
Right. Well, and I think West Virginia's thing is they're one-dimensional. Let's call that what it is, right? I mean, so two one-dimensional teams playing each other, it would be reminiscent to me of UCF Cincinnati last year, right? Mm-hmm. So that's I land on sort of Eric's side of the argument. I think that there's West Virginia feels like they could be on the verge of collapse by the time we get to them. Arizona State is still the iffy one to me because, again, I just it's going all the way out there. You know what I mean? Arizona, I think, is getting and again, number 11 BYU. I get it, but man, do they know something we don't with this 2-point line? Well, hey, there was a point where Notre Dame was an underdog to Texas A&M. Like, the line has not been great throughout the year in a lot of games. So I'm not. And it's susceptible. And I know it's susceptible to a lot of people, like, to the whales coming in early in the week, right? But I don't know, man. I'll give you this point too, as well, Eric Lopez, on the Utah game. I think the Black Friday thing also matters to UCF. Having a game on Black Friday again is going to matter to this fan base. I think that's a big deal. Is it USF coming in? Thank God, no. We've evolved past that trash. But at the end of the day, I think some of us have. Black Friday. Well,
to your point, Kyle, the game's sold out. The Utah game's been sold out. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I mean, in football, though, Jeff Sharon. In other sports, go crazy. I'm fine. But I think USF is a great stickball opponent. That's fantastic. Women's basketball as well. The punchline being that Black Friday tradition coming back, I think it was an excellent thing. I think UCF needs to try to push for that every year. This is what it is, man.
Well, the network did it. Here's the bottom line. A lot of this is dependent on what you get out of the quarterback.
Yeah.
You got to get, if you get better quarterback play, then you got a shot to win some of these. If you don't, you don't. It depends, and among other things.
If in Morgantown they do win Eric Lopez, as much as I'm thinking they won't, what I will say is for them to win that game, they would have had to have my favorite performance of the offense's year under Ja'Carri Brown to pull it off.
Yeah. I mean, because I think you're right. That game is going to be in cold weather. And what do we say about cold weather all the time? Got to run the ball.
Well, I think they're going to need that this week to go full circle here. Because I think BYU will score points. But I think you can score points on BYU, as Oklahoma State showed with Ollie Gordon and company. You could move the ball on BYU.
We've seen the blueprint, right?
Right.
So, I mean, to be honest, I might like the over.
And hide their rain gear in case it rains, too.
Well, that's true, too.
So I just wanted to put that out there. Sorry, OK State fans.
No, you're not.
I had to. No.
You better say sorry to Jordan Johnson, you meanie.
I know. But by the way, JJ, dude, you have it. I wasn't going to say you have one job, but you're the guy who is here. I mean, bring the rain gear, y'all. I'm guessing that he did, and they probably didn't listen to him.
I won't rule it out.
I mean, anyway. All right. Maybe they thought the head coach.
JJ has not had great luck against his old team. You notice that when he was an assistant with Cincy, that's the big game where RJ Harvey had his first big moment. OK State, that game last year, JJ was in town and UCF made him pay for it.
Yeah, fair. All right. All right. So again, 3:30 kick, UCF against BYU at home. And listen, I keep saying it. Winning's the great deodorant.
You're not wrong, buddy.
So.
I know, and listen, I know Lopez laughs at it, but I'm going to pull my own Jeff Sharonism here. It's a bowl game. Better than not making one. Can you imagine this
right.
if we miss the bowls?
Right.
Just saying.
Yeah. So, in fact, I'm going to go out. I'm going to go way out on a limb here, Kyle Nash. I'm going to say there's a non-zero chance of above 500 record here.
Whoa!
Non-zero chance. So, all right. Let's just check in real quick on some of the goings on in other UCF sports right now. And I want to start with volleyball right now at 8-8, but 1-6 in conference. Eric, they got swept by Kansas on Saturday. They lost in 4 at West Virginia. They come home for a rather familiar foe in the Houston Cougars, 7 p.m. for alumni night. They're going to recognize the 2014 championship team, Eric, which I think is going to be a lot of fun on Friday. And then Wednesday, Halloween against Cincinnati, which is an old tradition that we brought back, right? So, but the situation right now for UCF volleyball, I think is it's kind of rough. They're hitting this schedule. Again, it's the Big 12. It's, this is tough. But what are based on what you see for UCF volleyball right now, where are the opportunities to kind of get back into the swing of things and try and get the graph moving up and to the right a little bit?
Well, things are rough, Kyle, when even Bryson is skipping the segment. This is, he just couldn't even, I
didn't want to say it. I did not want to say it.
He was at the Kansas match, and he was just so despondent that he literally left town and is out of town, left the state, how just bummed out he is about the Olympic sport. So he's not even here. So I got to fill in, which is fine.
Listen, I'd rather hang out with Shaquille O'Neal on the golf course too. More on that later. Hint, hint.
Fair. I was not going to spoil that, but thank you very much. That's
great job, Kyle.
Thanks for playing along, Kyle. Thanks for playing along.
I'm teasing Eric Lopez.
But as far as volleyball, look, I mean, Kansas is the best team in the Big 12 right now. I mean, they only have one loss, which was
16-1.
They have the one loss to Creighton this year, but they're a team that, I mean, the committee though, and this is annoying if you're a Big 12 fan. They seeded them. They did this whole if the tournament started today, how would the committee seed this? They seeded Kansas 11. there. So
You know what? They're actually Kansas doesn't have the highest RPI in Big 12 volleyball. It's TCU at 14-4.
And they still get UCF's got to play them. TCU might have the best player in the conference. So, but here's the thing with UCF. I think they're missing some confidence. I think it showed in the West Virginia match. They were up 20-12 in the fourth set. West Virginia makes a push. And this was something I've talked to a lot of people around the sport. And we talked a little bit about this last week.
Yeah.
Teams in the Big 12 at this level will make a run at you.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be ready for that. In the American, with all due respect, and I love the American. I have like 5 rings of the American from my time there with softball and all that. The teams in volleyball especially did not answer back. Like UCF put them down. They didn't respond.
Yeah.
Big teams make a run here, like West Virginia did, 20-12. And I don't think this group, they start pressing a little bit. And I don't think they know exactly what does that mean? Who do we go to?
Is that youth, Eric?
A little bit of youth, a little bit of confidence, right? When you lose some of these, it takes its toll mentally on you.
Those go hand in hand, though, Elo.
Correct. Absolutely, 100%. And look, I mean, I think in a lot of ways now they're playing for 2025. I think Coach Mauer's made some adjustments. If you've noticed now, they're playing 2 setters.
Yeah, she went to the 6-2. Yeah.
6-2 with Ball, who obviously her dad played volleyball, U.S. national team, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
She brought a spark to them in that third set against Kansas. So I think you might see more of the young players like Ball and develop those youngsters and play for next year. And I think your goal, if you're volleyball, is you want to have this core confident going into next year. You add some pieces into next year, and then hopefully next year you can maybe have a better shot to contend in this deep league. But, man, this league is unforgiving regardless of the sport, especially in Olympic sports, because they could pick out your flaws. And I think that's what's going on here. Coach Mauer's referenced, obviously, they have some injuries. Ema Armour is still out. They're banged up, and that's what happens when you play in a power conference. That's one of the other adjustments. It's a physical league. Having been there in person to see some of the Big 12 volleyball, and Jeff could describe this better than I can probably. You're going from a ball that's, and I know this is an exaggeration, but in the American, maybe some of the players were hitting the ball around, 70, 75. I'm going to go the baseball reference, 70, 75, 80 miles an hour. It seems like everybody in the Big 12 is hitting the ball at 100 miles an hour. And it takes its toll. You know what I mean? Like that's the adjustment to some extent. And they get to balls that you think are kills, but are not. And so there's a lot of mental and physical stuff going on there. And listen, I know some people are grumbling. I know it's a surprise there because like I said, UCF's right now, unfortunately, on trend for their first losing season since 2015. But it's a new age in the Big 12. I mean, you're going to have to take your lumps.
And we said before, this volleyball would be the highest, the toughest climb of anybody. I will say their next 3 matches. Go ahead, Eric or Kyle.
We didn't say that. You said that.
Well,
I always said it would be women's hoops, but
I still think it's volleyball. But I will say this: the next 3 matches, October 25th against Houston, familiar foe. I think that's a gettable match. October 30th against Cincinnati. I think that's gettable. November 2nd at Texas Tech. Texas Tech's having a bad year. That could be a gettable match. I know it's on the road in Lubbock. Hard to play. Again, Lubbock is a really hard trip, but I think that's gettable. So let's flip it over to soccer. Eric, you were doing some soccer this weekend, weren't you?
I did the women's soccer game against Oklahoma State. Unfortunately, the Cowgirls came out on top 2-0. And, they're very good. One of the best defensive teams in the country. For UCF, I think it's really simple now. They host Cincinnati Friday night. It's a must win. You win, and you will make it to the Big 12 tournament. You lose, your season's over. Simple as that for this team.
They're 2 points back of Cincinnati in the standings in the Big 12. So, again, but that would give them a tiebreaker, right?
Well, remember, they're 1 game short because their game against Iowa State was no contest because of weather. So they're going by points per game now. We'll decide that. But really, if you look at it, Cincinnati, UCF, if UCF beats Cincinnati, they're going to have more points anyway. Look, their issue is they've had some injuries themselves. Yeah. They also have not had players that have finished plays like obviously Courtney, like Chloe Netzel has. For example, there was a moment in the first half, I believe, where Netzel set up Brooke Maroney wide open here, an opportunity to get a goal, didn't get it done, shot it wide, things like that. And it's just been a frustrating year for Coach Sahaydak, who's frustrated. I think she feels frustrated herself. They haven't gone through this before. They have not had a losing season in a non-COVID season. So I think there's some frustration there. And now we'll see how they respond. They know their season is literally on the line this Friday night against Cincinnati. It's a young team, young group, freshman goalies. It's a kind of a rebuild in a lot of ways.
6 p.m. Friday against Cincinnati. It's a space game and alumni weekend. Remember they had senior day like at the beginning of the year, which was kind of odd.
The Georgia match, yeah.
The Georgia match. But again, like winning's the great deodorant. You can, if you get this one, 2 points, all of a sudden, anything can happen, I think, in the tournament. And, it's one match to come down to it against, and I'd certainly rather it be against Cincinnati than, any other opponent, because, at least you're familiar with them, so, but that'll be tough. Their RPI right now, I'm trying to see if I can search for it here. This is 122. So one spot behind Miami, interestingly enough. So, but
alumni, like you said, for soccer and volleyball, same night.
Alumni,
for both sides.
A lot of old friends around this coming Friday.
That is correct.
So.
That is correct.
Last little bit here, men's soccer. I wanted to get in on this one because right now they're approaching that bubble, Eric. They're 53rd right now. Not quite where they need to be, but they're getting there. Now, they had a 2-0 win against Old Dominion in the space game. I didn't get a scarf. That saddens me, but that's all right.
Bryson Turner got one. You can check out the
I know Bryson Turner got one, and we're going to have a talk about that. But so their last three, okay, including now this week, Eric, Wednesday against Kentucky at home, Sunday at Georgia Southern. Now, you can get those two. I mean, it's good to have Kentucky certainly at home. I'd rather play them here in Lexington, that's for sure. They're right now 4th in the league, 3, 4, and 5 overall, 5 draws for Kentucky this year. And they have 8 total conference points. And then Georgia Southern right now with 5 total conference points. But we talked about it last week with Bryson, right, Eric? Is that you get these 2 matches, that's some results that you can pin up there, and then all of a sudden you're putting yourself in good position in the Sun Belt, no?
For sure, and keep perhaps your at-large chances opened a little bit. Yeah. But you've got Dorado back, who scored a goal in the victory over Coastal Carolina.
Him back so bad.
Yeah, at Coastal. They got Munoz back, so they've got their team back. It's just put yourself in a good spot in the conference tournament. Maybe you get a win against Kentucky, I think it would be huge. Mm-hmm. And then make a run at the conference tournament. Maybe you could slip in to the NCAA tournament if you don't win the conference tournament. They're certainly capable of that. They've dug themselves a hole in part because of the injuries. But they of the 3 teams we have talked about, they by far have the best shot to make postseason the NCAA tournament, as distant as it is. It's just, is it too little too late, or are they going to peak at the right time? That's to be determined. And we'll start getting some answers this Wednesday against Kentucky.
Well, the news is, the outlook is, right? I mentioned UCF right now, 53rd in the RPI men's soccer. Remember, only 48 teams get in. It's not a 64-team field. Kentucky right now is 63rd. And Georgia Southern is 73rd. So if we're going strictly by the formula, those are games we're going to have at least a good shot at winning. They might. Do you think they'll drag the number down even if we do win a little bit, Eric?
No, because you improve your win-loss percentage. That's the thing that's the men's team. So, but more than that, keep in mind, if you get to the conference tournament, odds are you're going to see either Marshall or West Virginia, or even, I think JMU is the other top team, right?
James Madison, that's right, yeah.
So odds are you're going to get a crack at one of those teams again at the conference tournament, and if you were able to get a result at the conference tournament, that could help your resume. That's the advantage of playing in a strong league like the Sun Belt. So, again, try to get some momentum, win some games, put yourself in the best position to make some noise at the conference tournament. I don't think they can make the NCAAs going out in the opening round of the conference tournament. That is a big no-no. So, but you build it starting now. Get to rhythm, win a couple of matches, and you might be able to slip in as one of the last teams in.
Yep. So Kentucky Wednesday, 7 p.m. at home.
Yes, Kyle. Kentucky and UCF are in the same conference in
That's
men's
right.
soccer. Did you know that, Kyle?
And South Carolina too,
Look at that,
Kyle. I should
Kyle.
mention, and West Virginia.
You
also.
have called this conference soccer play the SEC of
It
soccer.
means more here, Kyle. It means
just
more
means more.
soccer here.
It just means more, Kyle. All right, that'll wrap it up for this. What do we got going on? Obviously, we're all gonna be there at BYU.
That's correct. Night Shift live after the game for the instant reaction.
That's right. Elo, you gonna be there too?
Probably not. Somebody's got to host the show.
Yeah, he's gonna.
That's right. Yeah,
he's gonna bridge the night
You're
shift.
gonna be back at Night Shift headquarters.
That's right.
Night Shift headquarters. We'll make this happen for BYU. I mean, I will be obviously checking out volleyball and soccer a little bit that Friday night.
Any reports back from softball, by the way?
Fall ball is underway. Glad you asked. This weekend, it's ready to rock. Young group. Young group. You know, it's they're young.
A lot of new faces around, huh?
A lot of new faces that were not born yet by the time I was calling games there at the complex at 19.
Man, we are starting to hit that point where it's like, oh my God, we are that old.
Pretty much, guys.
Oh, listen, win more awards and show them it's just a number, Lopez. Whatever.
Listen, it's just what it is. So yeah, new players, young team. Yeah, both baseball, softball, practicing fall ball. They got softball's already played a couple of fall ball games. Baseball, I believe, is underway. Going to play a fall ball game or played one on the road. They're going to play at home. So yeah, ball bat going to take over here real soon, whether Kyle likes it or not.
Kyle's favorite time of year, fall ball.
The Sultan of Stickball knows no age. I fear nothing for you.
Very good.
All right. Also, 3:30 kick UCF against BYU at home as well. That should be. There's a lot riding on that one, man. And if it goes well, hey, like we said, that could be something real interesting coming up. All right. So that'll do it for us. Shout out to Don Strouble, Don Documents 407 on social for his basketball coverage. You can follow him there. Check out his article on Black and Gold Banneret.
More of his work above and all that. UCF Media Day for Hoops. Don Strouble was there along with me and Bryce.
Yes.
We're going to doing all that for Media Day. Don't forget to check that out. Black and Gold Banneret YouTube channel.
We're going to have some hoops preview show coming down the road here.
Yes, we're already working on pulling both of them together. So I got some interviews out there. I got a few lines in the water. We'll see what bites.
Tease. I like it.
You can follow Kyle at the SOTG for the student of the game. You can follow Eric at Eric Lopez Elo. You can follow me on Threads at Jeff Sharon. Don't forget to follow also Bryson Turner at It's Bryson Turner on X. Follow us collectively at Black and Gold Banneret. We are the home of UCF on SB Nation. You can also follow us on social media, X at UCF Banneret _SBN. Everywhere else, Black and Gold Banneret. That includes Instagram, Threads, Facebook, and also, like Kyle mentioned, our YouTube channel where we have been pumping out tremendous amounts of content, especially now that basketball season is about to get underway. Media Day was a lot of fun, by the way. It was nice to meet some of those guys. Benny Williams and I were talking about places to eat down on Marshall Street in Syracuse.
Oh, okay.
This is how much fun I had with this.
I wondered why you were over there so long.
DJ was fun.
Oh, listen, I love talking to him and reliving the moment with him and Shikinbake Zhang and him.
Okay, before we go, guess who was at the game?
Was Bake there?
And Bake was there.
Oh man, now I am ticked. I missed it.
You should be.
I
great. He's doing good.
Stupid Jacksonville Jaguars playing on Sunday, getting in the way of things and all.
I gave him the finger wag. He still remembers.
I hope he does.
He still remembers. Awesome. Shout out to the late Dikembe Mutombo.
Here. Yeah.
So that was fun. And he was talking about Mustafa. Had a lot of good things to say about Mustafa Cham. And I
about to say that too is on the Black and Gold Banner YouTube channel. By the way, subscribe. We're closer to 1,000 every day.
Yes,
it's there.
We are very close. All right. For Don, for Kyle, for Eric, I'm Jeff. Thank you so much for listening. This has been the Night Shift podcast. We will see you for UCF and BYU Night Shift Live after Knights and Cougars.